Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good to see you all. My name is Jessica Jeppe Olausson. I work at RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden. I've had the pleasure to be the project manager for this project with a great team that you are going to meet today. Let's see, I forgot that I need to do this. So I'm going to guide you through this day, and there will be opportunities for you to ask questions towards the end. So please remember your questions, note them down, or write them in questions and answers in this meeting. It's called F&S in Swedish, frågor och svar. So you can also write there, but there will be some time towards the end to ask questions. And a colleague of mine in this project has found something.
Yes, Jessica, I was writing my diary yesterday, and I found in the end of the diary something from the future that I would like to share with you. So this is from the November 20th, 2040, so far away in the future. Dear diary, the sea was calm this morning. I boarded the operation and maintenance vessel just after dawn to visit the offshore wind farm north of Åland for the latest biodiversity monitoring. The surface felt almost glassy all the way out. Standing on deck, I watched the silhouettes of the turbines rising out of the mist, quiet structures anchored in the brackish sea. Beneath them, the foundations were thick with mussels, algae, and small fish weaving between the steel. Hard to imagine that 20 years ago, the seabed was soft, low diversity environment with little for anything to attach to. The divers recorded today's data. The mussel biomass has doubled again since last year, and the census confirm a steady rise in species richness. The numbers go straight into the National Registry, part of the verification process for the next batch of biodiversity credits. It still amazes me that we can measure the return of life as precisely as we once measured emissions. The 100 square meters of living seabed has become a new kind of financial unit, verified, traded, even insured. At the control station, the big screen showed today's results from the verification team. Investors and regulators now follow the same updates with the same attention they once reserved for carbon data. Life has become something we can track and value. I remember when the first biodiversity credit was issued 15 years ago. People called it symbolic. A nice idea, they said. But will anybody pay for it? They did. Today, offshore energy developers report net biodiversity gain alongside megawatts produced. Coastal communities receive revenue from restored ecosystems, and school children learned the basics of biodiversity accounting in their science classes. On the way back, I stood on the deck as we passed a small flock of seagulls hunting near one of the foundations. Somewhere below, mussels was filtering the same sea that now appears in financial statements. As I stepped ashore, a child pointed at the harbor and shouted, "Look, a fish!" I smiled, because that was, of course, the real dividend. So, Jessica, this is from the future. Could it look like this?
Yeah, that's a great vision, isn't it? Thank you, Lotta. Well, let's see what we can find out together this morning. So to guide you through the day, I'm going to start by presenting the project team. You already met Lotta, but I will introduce everyone a little bit more. We will also have a short introduction and some results in short to start off with before we go into details. And the three areas we're going to talk about this morning is how have we created or tried to make habitats for biodiversity? And how have we evaluated the impacts on the ecosystem from these habitats? And lastly, but not the least, how increased biodiversity can generate a stronger business case. And of course, we will guide you through our conclusions, and then we will wrap up with some expert comments, questions from you, and then we will finish off around 10 o'clock. And this project actually started at another conference where I ran into Magnus. Sorry, I'm having some problems getting there. That's the right slide. Magnus, he's at the bottom there, and we got talking at a conference, and a few months later he called me and said, hey, we have this idea. And I said, sounds super interesting. And then we decided to progress with this transdisciplinary project, which I can talk for all of us safely and say that we've enjoyed it very much. So Lotta at the top left there, you have already met her. She is a permit manager at UX2. And then we have our colleagues Birgit and Lena, who are with SLU Aqua, who worked with our biodiversity credits. You already met me. And then we have my RISE colleague, Ruth, who is our business designer. Magnus, who I met at the conference, who works for a company called Nemo Sea Farms. And Joel, who works at another company called Underytan. So this is the project team. And why Nordic Biobus? Well, we could see that there was a lot of talk around offshore windmills, offshore parks, and we wanted to explore this perspective of biodiversity and if that's possible to incorporate into a business model. So in this project, we've explored synergies between offshore wind energy and low trophic aquaculture, so algae and mussels, not fish, and ecosystem services enhancement in the Baltic Sea. But of course, with a view to see if we can create value for the whole Nordic region. And we want to create a multifunctional business model and a method for marine biocredits in the Baltic Sea. And we see this as the kickoff for this type of work. And we're happy to have funding from Nordic Innovation and also some co-funding from the MISTRA program, Co-Creating Better Blue. And Ruth, you have taken us through this cycle. You want to tell us about it?
Yes, certainly. So hi, everyone. Just to make sense of what we've done, I wanted to give you a brief look into. This is an innovation project, which means that you start with exploration and then you go through different phases. It might be investigation where you go a little bit deeper. You start actually piloting, you might launch limited live tests. And then when you've proven that, okay, this is a bulletproof business model and case, then you can scale it. But first, you actually have to investigate in each phase and iterate the solution that you come up with and the findings. And since we're working with business cases today, I know that we're a lot of people who come from different sciences, but since I work a lot with business model innovation, the goal is to find something that's really desirable, feasible, and viable. And that's also regenerative, meaning that it's good for the planet, basically. And in the middle there, we have a sweet spot for where we think a business model should end up if it's truly successful. So we're early in this project. This has been an exploration project. I would say some of it is in terms of investigation. The pilots in the sea are definitely pilots, but it's a bit spread out. So just bear that in mind when we go through the results and what we've found. We need to keep iterating this. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruth. And so what did we come up with? Just to give you a teaser before we go into the details, like I said. Well, excuse me, morning still. We have investigated, like I said, the effects on the ecosystem by having pilots in the ocean. And that's mainly Magnus and Joel who've been in charge of this. And we've tried to develop this concept for biodiversity enhancing methods and successfully tested it in the water. And what we found is that mussels can attach to steel structures with the right techniques. And you will soon find the details about that. Then we have our team from SLU, together with the rest of us, of course, have been thinking a lot about the biodiversity credits and nutrient compensations. And they did find that ecological engineering facilitated blue mussel establishment, and that mussel farming in offshore wind farms can help and mitigate eutrophication. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? So you will hear more about this. But can you make business out of all of this? This was one of our core questions. Well, we have looked at this regenerative business model and the business model setup developed, including biodiversity credits and selling biodiversity impact included in the electricity price. So Ruth will guide us through this towards the end of the presentation. So with this, I hand over to my colleagues, Joel and Magnus. Please.
You are now both muted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this. So thank you, Jessica, for the lovely introduction to our work. And this interdisciplinary team and the work that we have done together has been a great journey. Coming this far from the first discussion and meeting between Magnus and Jessica, I have to say. From our side, at Underytan, together with Magnus, we have been mainly focusing on what happens underneath the surface. So we have been responsible for the field trials when it comes to field trials, tests, and pilot when it comes to this project. And we have mainly used this picture, as you can see, and our model and design to form as the base for these tests. So the focus has been to looking into biodiversity enhancing techniques, both for the foundation structure, but also the scour protection, where we have trialed different methods to see and have a base for the verification of the biodiversity credit. So this is the physical structures that's necessary to work with the keystone species that we are looking into for creating habitats in a faster pace than would potentially for the settlement in a faster pace than potentially would be done otherwise. And this is based on at Björkshär, which is 30 kilometers, about 30 kilometers from Mariehamn, and the pilots, which I will go more into, is at an area where we have 20 meters of depth. And here is one part. This is the mainly the pilots for the scour protections that mimics that. So this was deployed in May 2024. We had a period for 1 week where we had to look into the possibility to deploy this when we had
Ring de här, skriv ut dig från det här.
When the wind was...
Someone has their mic on in the audience, Sophie, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, when the wind was almost non-existent, to get it at the place that we wanted to have them, to keep them focused into those areas. So what we went for here is, if I start with the reference site and then go into the artificial reef pilot, we started with mimicking the scour protection, where you use local boulders and rocks in different size, which would be used when you are looking into how you create the scour protection around the foundations in an offshore wind farm. So we had that as a reference site. So we could see how does the settlement look like when it comes to mainly our keystone species, blue mussels, but also what kind of habitats are we creating for different fish species simultaneously in this area of soft bottom substrate. And from that reference reef, we went to create this more enhanced scour protection, which also forms as an artificial reefs, where we added concrete structures in different forms, as you can see on the pictures as well, but also wooden logs, which is something that we can use in the Baltic Sea due to the salinity level, and that we don't have any woodworms here. So we also wanted to work more with artificial reef structures created from wood in different forms that we got locally from our partners. And then simultaneously, we also put out some steel cages with blue mussels. And this is, unfortunately, the success rate on this is still ongoing where we are doing the monitoring. So in this presentation now, we don't have any results from that, but hopefully that will be something that we will get in the coming years as well when we are continuing our trials, which is ongoing at Project Björkskär within our collaboration with OX2 and Nemo Sea Farms. And then we have the foundations pilots. This is highly interesting as well. The structures what we wanted to do here is create, mimic the steel structure of a foundation. And we had 4 different pilots here. We had one reference pilot, as we had with Discover Protection. It is only the steel structure with nothing attached. Then we focused on one pilot in which we focus more on bladderwrack and attach those. Then we had one pilot with only mussels, and then we had one with both mussels and bladderwrack on the same structure. And this structure had 3 sides. So on one side, we used lines and ropes. One side, we had nets. And on one side, we had cages as well. So what we wanted to do here is to see that if we add bladderwrack, for example, if I take that as the first example, if we take bladderwrack and attach it to this steel structure, would it have the possibility to spawn on and attach to the steel structure? And we did the same with mussels as well, where we had already a host population and host nets of mussels available from the year before. We also had host ropes with mussels that we moved from a nearby location to this particular site. So it's from the area of Björkskär where we had the mussels here. And what we wanted to see was if we add these structures or biodiversity enhancing techniques to the foundation structures or the steel structures, will we have a faster settlement of the species that we want to have to settle on these foundation structures? And this was highly interesting, and we wasn't sure initially when we started this pilot if we would have the chance to get results in such a short time as the project, which is 1.5 years. So we decided to go for having at least 2 seasons for gathering the data for this. And what we can see from this pilot is that we have mussels that has moved and settled on the steel structures on where we have done this biodiversity enhancing technique, whilst they have not settled on the bare steel structures without these. The Fucus vesiculosus, always a bit picky when it comes to substrates and attaching to things. So they haven't settled on the steel structures yet, but that is something that is ongoing now and a continuous work that we will continue to develop. And I will now leave over to Magnus.
Thank you, Johan. I will continue with Johan's computer as the microphone, so you will see me as muted, but I hope you can hear me. So like Johan said, speaking in ecological and biological terms, 1.5 year project is quite a short time. But we were lucky enough to have Project Björkskär in the background. And Project Björkskär is a cooperation between OX2 and Underytan and Nemo Sea Farms that we initiated in the beginning of 2023. And within that project, we have installed different kind of pilots for different purposes. But what was relevant for this project was these pilots that we call the beds, or sängar in Swedish. So these were installed, you can see them on the picture there, during May to August in 2023, giving us a much longer data frame or period to see what kind of species settles on these metal structures. Of course, keeping in mind that these biobus pilots were more for active enhancing, moving muscles and seaweed into the pilot, but these are only trialing different substrates on the foundations to see what settles naturally. All in all, we have nine different of these Björkskärs installation, the beds, and they are all consisting of 4 different angles, of course, and then within those each and different angle, we have 8 different plates or materials and substrates, which consists of untreated steel, painted steel. We have a steel plus net, which you can see right in the lower bottom picture there, right in the middle. We have steel with gravel on it, and we have steel with leca on it. We have stainless steel, which according to us wasn't so stainless because it got rusted really fast. And then we have a best grade steel. But all of these beds have been installed in water depths between 10 and 20 meters, giving us some good directions on what kind of species there will settle. You can change, please. Of course, building pilots, deploying pilots is one part of the whole job. Then, of course, to get any data, any relevant information out of it, we need to set up a monitoring system. And we decided in the beginning that we were going to monitor all the pilots 1 to 2 times a month during the months that aren't covered with ice, of course. So this was mainly done with me and Joel freediving. Of course, freediving, we have a certain limit on how deep we can go. So we mainly focused on the foundation pilots that were in the 4, 5, 6 meters depth, water depth. We actually dived once also to the 20-meter depth, but yeah, that wasn't the best option. So for that, we also had a ROV to check the artificial reef pilots, which were on the 18, 20 meters depth. Unfortunately, we had some issues with one of our ROVs during the first summer, but we quickly fixed that, so we didn't miss too much. Then also we had divers on the location, giving us valuable data, videos, and pictures of how it looks down beneath the surface. And what we monitored basically was the growth, species abundance, colonization, what kind of ecosystem there is created on our structures. Now this is of course more for sessile species. It's hard to get any fish or any moving species when you're diving because they all get scared and run away. So for this purpose, we actually teamed up with a Swedish company called Sea Analytics, run by Matthias Obst, and together we developed this system of a let's say a cheap alternative, a reliable alternative to monitor mobile species. And it's based, you can see the picture there in the left corner. We basically put a camera at the bottom of the sea and let it run for some hours, and then with the help of AI systems and AI tools, we could recognize what kind of species. First, we taught the AI system, and yeah, so we could recognize the species and quantify how many, how much, and what they were doing basically. And it was a really good test. We got some nice results from it, but we're not going to talk about that anything more in this presentation. You will have a separate report on their findings coming out soon. And of course, we collected pictures, data, did some desktop analysis on those, and the data we gathered, we sent them to our colleagues, Birgit mainly and Lena, and who could then do the analysis on those. Most importantly here, as you will also mention, the monitoring continues. So the project will end now. Unfortunately, all good thing comes to an end, but the pilots are still out in the sea, and we will continue the work during the next years. But now I will give the floor over to my colleague Birgit, if I can get this technology to work.
She needs to request control. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, very welcome also from me. I will continue now talking on how we evaluated biodiversity in the trials that Magnus just talked about last in his presentation, where we had these steel frames here with different kind of surfaces. And this is a picture here on the left, how they looked before installation. And this is a picture how they looked, I think about 1.5 years after they were installed. So you can already see from this picture that they cover quite differently with different organisms. Some of them had a lot of blue mussels, some of them had hardly any, even though they were just next to each other. So with one of the aims of the project was to work with biodiversity credits. And what is that? It's a market-based mechanism that aims to get funding mobilized for biodiversity conservation and restoration. And a good definition is from the Biodiversity Credit Alliance that it's a certificate where you have a measured and evidence-based unit of positive biodiversity outcome that should also be durable and additional to what otherwise would have occurred. So those are the things you should prove when you try and apply this concept. So as Magnus and Joel said, we had the monitoring to get the evidence base and the additionality by comparing with the reference. In our case, this positive biodiversity outcome was that we wanted to create improved biodiversity, more species, quicker around these structures. And then I want to give 2 cautionary notes or comments on this, that when we're working with the restoration and conservation, we apply this mitigation hierarchy, which means that in the first place, we try to avoid damage to the ecosystem or habitat as much as we can. If we do something like build something, we want to minimize the damage to nature as much as we can. And then when we anyway when there's some damage created, we try to compensate for it. So this is what we call the mitigation hierarchy. And the cautionary note is that the biodiversity credits come on top of that. So we first work with the mitigation hierarchy, and then biodiversity enhancement methods could be used to cause additional improvement on what you are building, for example, which is called nature positive development. So you will still have a damage, but you can make it better than if you would not be working with trying to optimize for nature and ecology. So this is what we call ecological engineering, to not just build a structure for the purpose it has, like, for example, wind energy generation, but to actually try and make it as good as possible for organisms, for biodiversity. And whether or not that is wanted is case and site dependent. That is also important. So it's not by default so that we always want to do these methods. Sometimes maybe we have a site where we would like to minimize reformation, and we just want to have a structure that doesn't attract reef or these hard substrate species. But sometimes there might be a case where we would like to stimulate the reef formation, and this is what we're talking about here. So on the picture on the right here, you see that there will usually form artificial reefs around hard structures that you put into the sea. That can take a while. So what we are testing here is, can we speed this up, and can we steer this into a direction that we think is positive for nature? And as has been mentioned by Joel and Magnus, we had our target species that were blue mussels and bladder wrack. They are very common species in the Baltic Sea on hard structures, and we targeted for them because they are what we call habitat building species. So they make a very nice spatial structure that attracts many other species, and kind of stimulates the formation of this, what we call an artificial reef. In the Baltic Sea, about 30 to 40 other macro species are associated with the blue mussels and the bladderwrack. And then also this develops over time. So typically biodiversity, or the number of species, for example, increases with the age of these mussel patches. And also blue mussels and bladderwrack contribute to other important ecosystem services, such as fixing nutrients from the water column. So how did we evaluate from the monitoring data that we got? We got the data on how much of the different sessile species is sitting on different surface structures here. And then we calculated this as a type of weighted species richness. So species richness is simply the number of different species, and we weighted it by a factor that is kind of taking into account how important those species are in the system. So this is kind of artificial, but based on ecological and system knowledge, the weighing factor. And so this is calculated by taking the coverage of each species times the weight that we assigned, summing it up, and then subtracting the same value, like the coverage of the different species times the weights summed up on the reference. So here comes the additionality, because we of course also have species attaching to the plain steel structures. And just a note that we didn't see any invasive species on these trials here, but it is another positive thing, so to say, of ecological engineering is that you try to, as quick as possible, get the native species to settle, and that you try to attract those species, usually the native ones that you want to have in the area, because otherwise invasive species, sessile invasive species, can be quite quick to colonize new structures. So you can minimize that risk by doing these ecological engineering measures. And when we have this biodiversity value, we multiply it with the area of the ecological engineering, in this case, the substrate that we provided. And then by setting a price, we would come to biodiversity credit. Now I show you some data here. Don't get lost in the numbers, please. I'll try to summarize the main points here. We are having, again, these structures, and here's some data from 2 of those structures for the different materials. In blue here marked is the untreated steel, which would be our reference. And in yellow marked is the structure that actually most quickly and most intensively got covered by blue mussels. And that was this structure here with LECA. So we could clearly see that the surface structure plays a big role in how quickly it gets colonized by these habitat building species that we wanted to attract, the blue mussels. We also had barnacles and filamentous algae, like covering certain surfaces. And then we did these calculations of the biodiversity value. So the surfaces with a higher spatial complexity, they generally got colonized more quickly and extensively. Whereas on the smooth steel surfaces within those 2 years, we usually just had no coverage of blue mussels or very low values. But instead, they often got covered with these filamentous algae, like this red algae, for example, you see on the picture here. So here we could show clearly that this higher complexity and heterogeneity of the surface structures that could stimulate the reformation, make it quicker and attach blue mussels, give it a better substrate to attach. And here's another example of the data where this is the monitoring data over time. This is also a lot to grasp, but in essence, it's on the x-axis time for about 1.5 years, and on the y-axis, the coverage. And the point here in these 4 graphs is simply that on the steel surfaces, you had very low blue mussel coverage, up to about 25% within these 2 years. Those are the triangles. Whereas now we'll switch to the ecologically engineered, more complex surfaces. The gravel and the LECA structures got covered quickest and nearly completely. And the steel net that is also a bit more complex, it's not as smooth, also got covered. But it started a bit later, it took a bit longer. So here we could see this exactly what we would like to have. This concept of biodiversity credits is an additional effect. We also have the coverage on the steel surfaces, but now we have an additional effect here that also is lasting. And the biodiversity index increased over time since we got more and more. According to the calculations, that value increased. Yes, and now I'll come to the second part that we were looking into. So this was the artificial reef biodiversity enhancement part. And those mussels are supposed to grow there. But we could also imagine that we in the wind farms could actually farm mussels, blue mussels, as a type of aquaculture. And in that case, these would be harvested, and that would not be on the foundations. That would be, for example, on lines or in mussel cages. So there will be a kind of multi-use activity where you try to combine two marine activities in the same area, which can be beneficial because you, for example, get more space efficient. So this is called multi-use, and we just did some calculations on how much nutrients would be possible to approximately fix in those mussels in such a setup based on a number of assumptions. So this is just to be seen as a rough first estimation. We used literature values for nitrogen and phosphorus contents in blue mussels in that area that we were working on, because that varies, for example, with salinity. And we made certain assumptions of how much mussel farming there would be and of the lifetime of the wind farm, which is typically around 40 years. And then we come up with a number of an amount of tons of nitrogen and amount of tons of phosphorus that could be removed from the system if we would harvest the mussels. And this could be beneficial since the Baltic Sea is quite eutrophied, has quite a high content of nutrients. So this could be a potential measure of reducing the amount of nutrients a little bit by removing biomass, at the same time obtaining food or resources for other products in the form of those mussels. And these are not large numbers in terms of how much nutrients there are in the Baltic Sea, but they can make a contribution, definitely, to mitigate the eutrophication problem. Certainly, if you would build these multi-use wind farms on a larger scale, as is planned in Nordic areas. And with this, I hand over to Ruth.
Thank you, Birgit. And I will also just request control. Thanks. So now we've been talking a lot about what actually happens in the water. And I will not be talking about what happens in the water because they've done it so well. I focused actually on how this can impact the business case. It might not be the first thing you think of when hearing about these structures, but that's basically what we wanted to see. Does it actually have that potential to generate a stronger business case? So I will walk you through a few things. We will go through all of the ways we found that we can capture value from increased biodiversity. I will go straight to the findings where we think this is the most impactful, this is the most realistic. And then we will run through the revenue stream scenarios for that and a little bit about the characteristics that we've mapped out. And then just showing how this new business ecosystem built then on multi-use that Birgit was just explaining could look like. All right, so what we did is that we set out and said, okay, if we think really, really broadly about this, what are the ways that we can capture value from increased biodiversity? And I know that we have a lot of people who work with biology here, but it's notoriously difficult to capture value from nature into a balance sheet because we enjoy so much about nature, but we don't actually pay for it in most cases. At least here in Sweden, we have allemansrätten, but I don't pay for going into the woods, but I really, really appreciate it. So what is it actually worth? So some of the new income streams that we lined out was then biodiversity credits, the biomass that can come from these procedures, having it as a test site for new sensors aimed at looking at biodiversity, patenting these types of methods, or fishers paying a higher price to fish in these waters. We went really, really broad, not saying that all of these are very realistic or viable, but we just went super broad. And then we looked at lowering costs. What could actually lower cost here? Could we get an improved lease for the water area, or could we have to mitigate the biodiversity loss in less costly ways? Could we have green loan benefits, or could we save on capex in terms of shared facilities? Or will we not have to pay fishers a price for their missed outcomes? And then we looked at some other benefits like priority of water use because we have the most optimal ways of operations. Could we receive certain certifications? In other industries, it can be that if you have a really excellent way of working with nature, you get a certification and then you're allowed access to different types of capital, for example. So we evaluated this based on what could be the potential impact on the business case. For those of you who are working with wind power, you know that it's quite capital intensive. It costs a lot of money to build a wind farm. So it needs to make a pretty decent contribution to actually move the needle here. And we could first say some of these were definitely not, we're not going to have an impact. Maybe they will in 20 years time, but for today they didn't. But we found 8 that we wanted to look further into. And these are the ones that we actually selected. So 3 ways of increasing biodiversity, how that could impact the business case. So if we start with the new income streams, we quite quickly saw that, okay, wait, maybe we can be selling dark green energy. And what I mean by that is biodiversity included in the renewable energy price. So I will let you in more about the technicality of that. Another part then is the biodiversity credits or carbon credits, which can be formulated in different ways, and then the biomass proceedings. And I put these percentages just to give you a rough estimate of how that could impact the business case. To build an offshore wind park, it costs approximately 30 billion euros. So this is expensive stuff. And for it to be really important for the business case, it needs to make, we have to earn a lot of money from it, basically. Then we saw on lowered costs that it could actually give us access to impact or ESG investors who are looking for a specific type of impact, biodiversity impact, or that we reach certain targets in the ESG investors' portfolios. And another benefit that I think is an excellent example when regulation is really spot on is the Net Zero Industry Act, where we could see that we can get preferential treatment in public auctions. If all things similar, we can prove that we actually have positive impact on biodiversity, we will get selected before others. And that's, to me, it's such a smart way to actually make companies see the value in working with biodiversity. But so let's talk a little bit more about the dark green energy. So when you're selling, and I love that we have a lot of people working with wind power here today. So please correct me if I say anything that you are that you don't agree with. But there's something called the power purchase agreement. So you can basically hedge for an energy price, or you want to guarantee that you will be given access to energy during a period of time, or you can say, I want to have energy at this certain price. So that's the power purchase agreement that you can make as a company with a power supplier, basically. And today you have something called guarantees of origin, which is a certificate that says this is renewable energy from wind, this is renewable energy from solar. It costs different things, and it comes with a price premium. So a lot of companies buy this because they want to make sure that we will be given access to renewable energy. And here we're basing it on the assumption that if we can measure biodiversity and say in 5-10 years time, we can measure it quite accurately, this will also mean that carbon, the way that we've seen carbon been put into businesses now that they actually want to mitigate or they want to reduce their emissions, biodiversity impact will go the same way. So the same type of price premium will appear for biodiversity impact. And I'm not the biggest fan actually of showing calculations when I do presentations, but bear with me here. What I want you to just like walk through here, and this is, as I said, it's based on the assumption that biodiversity impact will go the same way as carbon, that the more we can measure it, the more important it will be for companies to actually be able to mitigate it or to pay for the what they can't mitigate, basically. So if you have baseline electricity, you have a certain price, and it makes you a certain amount of money, 975 million euros in this case, based on the size of the park. But if you have renewable electricity, you can add that price premium, which in this case is 3 euros per watt hour. And we've just taken the exact same assumption that you will have to add an extra 3 that will give you even more. So it will raise it will increase the annual revenue actually of 6% per year, which is a lot. That's a lot of money when it comes to wind power. And then it's about selling the biodiversity credits, which is, I'm super happy that we have Martin Pilstjärna today. He will give some expert comments on this, but it's very difficult to say how you should price these. And when you go through the literature and you do market stands, it's very widespread. Guarantees of origin, GO is guarantees of origin. That's the certificate that it's a renewable energy. But yeah, no worries. I know that there's a lot of words, hard words in this, but yeah. So we went super conservative when we calculated the biodiversity credits, and we're basing this off among a few other sources, but Seacheese, who have been selling units, they have though used hectares, so we've calculated a little bit differently. But then there's also the optimistic version where we can see that this would have a pretty substantial contribution each year. So bottom line, if we can measure biodiversity correctly, there's a lot of money to be made here. But what about the biocharacteristics? And I think this is important because we as former of this market or this potential opportunity that's coming in the 5-10 years, we can say, okay, we have a voluntary market for biodiversity credits. We can see this in some of the carbon credit markets, not very effective, and it doesn't make the people we want to pay the biggest price for this pay. The companies that buy these might have the motivation of it can be for marketing, it can be for social license to operate or employer branding. It's philanthropic reasons. And for me to suggest that you should develop a product and hope for philanthropic contributions for you to make money, that is something I wouldn't feel comfortable doing. So I would say that the estimated addition to the business case, if this is the future that we're looking at with a voluntary market that doesn't put any regulations in place, I would say the contribution is quite low. But what if we had a part of a regulated cap and trade market that we see for the emissions in the EU? That would be really interesting, because then you would actually read the corporations that have the most negative impact. And I'm sorry for throwing LKAB and SSAB under the bus here, but those are the ones we know that they actually pay to be able to let out more emissions. And the motivations for them would be to actually transition, and it will transport the money from the people who are releasing the most or having the worst impact to actually get funds to those who are doing the best, which I think is really important. There's no way for me to estimate what kind of addition that would be to the business case, but I think it would be it's uncertain now, but I think it would have a big impact. But what we can say about the included in the power purchasing agreement, because this is already a functioning system. This is already a functioning market. You can see the prices of how this go up and down, and they're when you're buying electricity. So the buyer of these are Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, Google, etc. A lot of these big companies that use a lot of electricity. And their motivations can be multiple things, but to reach their targets that they've set, if they've subscribed to, a lot of these different, science-based targets and everything, or for risk mitigation, basically. And then it's also significant. So I think that's important to understand that there is a design choice to be made in how we actually formulate this market, or how we design the setup of this market. So now I talked a lot, but the last thing I wanted to see is just to give you a picture of that. This is what the new business ecosystem could look like if it's built on multi-use for offshore wind power, and increasing biodiversity. So instead of just having that traditional business ecosystem where your main product is energy, you can instead have a new business ecosystem where you both have dark green energy, you might have biocredits, and you might be selling biomass, which would generate more value for society in so many ways. So let's get to our conclusion then. We have a concept we have successfully trialed, and we also, and Magnus and Joel, they still have the pilot in the water, it's ongoing. We've shown that low trophic aquaculture can have a positive impact on biodiversity. And investing in these type of biodiversity initiatives is really a huge opportunity. So now we need to prove the desirability. Going back to that model that I showed you in the beginning, we can see that there's feasibility in this. If we're able to format it, it's definitely a regenerative business model. But we need to prove the desirability of the offer in power purchasing agreements, and we need to prove the desirability of the biodiversity credits that we will be formatting in this. I just want to emphasize that I think we have a tremendous opportunity to unlock investment in biodiversity, an area that is really underfunded by billions of dollars. And what I found the most exciting about this project is working cross-disciplinary. It's not easy. We need to understand each other, and we need to respect that. What can we prove? What can't we prove? And how to move further with these things. But it's really made us see the entire value chain, from having these initiatives or actually doing things in the water to how it comes up into or comes into a balance sheet. So I think for the people here today to have anything who can shape reporting or mitigation or incentive frameworks, I think if we really truly support these nature positives initiatives, I think we can see a different world coming forward, so we can meet Lotta's reality that she talked about in the beginning. And with that said, I'm gonna hand over back to Jessica.
Thank you, and thank you, teammates. I hope you hear me properly now. What happened now? Let's see. I just wanted to do this. Okay. So I'm blown away by all these cool results, even though I've followed the project these 1.5 years. And I, like Ruth said, we've had several sort of aha moments when in this transdisciplinary team. So it hasn't been without bumps in the road, but it's been a great journey. And to sort of continue on that cross-disciplinary theme, we have invited 3 experts, I would like to say, who we would like to comment from your different points of view. And so we just recently now heard from Ruth. So I think I will start with you, Carola. You're the CEO of Ålandsbankens fondbolag. So let me just see that I have you on screen. Oh, I know you're here.
Have my camera open, so I hope you can find me.
Now I see you. Excellent. Welcome. So based on what we have, thank you. So based on what you've heard here today, what do you think are the most valuable insights from your point of view?
First and foremost, I'm really impressed about all the results, and since I work in a total different line of business, I think it's quite interesting to see that you can do a lot by testing and of course, like in financing, you're measuring a lot and you can get really good results in very small efforts, but still get kind of analyzing what it does and can be scalable, most probably in a different way. I think it's interesting. And then, as I said last time also in Björkskär, I think one of the main challenges is going to be how to generate the business value of the findings and how to be able to clarify what's in it for the companies that might buy the biodiversity tokens, or what we call them. I think that's one of the really important things, that the major project is really big, building the windmill parts, and then what happens under ytan is also, I think, something that can be brought into business, but I don't know how, but it needs to be quite clear. Otherwise, the value will not be big for companies.
Right. And under ytan is below the surface, just if there's anyone, just to so everyone can follow. But Carola, what do you think? Like, if from the different options or scenarios that Ruth just presented, in your line of business, what do you think is the most viable? Like, which one is most actionable?
I think the biodiversity credits is most probably going to be the maybe easiest, because that's something that the industry already understands, that how do you use that kind of a vehicle in your own business. And then I'm not sure if there is scalability in everything that's possible to do with whatever grows, like the mussels. Can we scale that so much that it's going to be in a line of business where you can actually have a profitable business around it? That I unfortunately cannot predict or see.
Right.
So I think the credits is most likely to be one of the first steps I would go for.
That's interesting to hear. So I'll move on. I might come back to you, Carola. But Martin, if I can, let's see if I can have you on film. I was going to say on camera. I'm sure you will show up. But Martin, Ruth briefly referred to you earlier. So you're a project member of the Swedish Biocredit Alliance, and you have also been visiting us at Björkskär, and we have a dialogue with you throughout the project. But how do you see the biocredit market evolving? What do you think? Do you think it will evolve, and how?
Yeah, so hello everyone. Nice to be here and to listen to these presentations. Extremely interesting. So yes, I've been working with the colleagues in the SBA Alliance for a couple of years with trying to develop the infrastructure for a voluntary biodiversity credit market in the Nordics, in Sweden in particular. So I think at the moment, as many of you might have understood, there is sort of a very small but developing biodiversity credit market. And what we see now is that there are a couple of emerging really important integrity initiatives taking place, which I think is extremely important and good to be aware of, coming from large global integrity bodies such as BCA that was mentioned before, IAPB as well, and World Economic Forum. So I think this is something that is a little bit different compared to when the carbon credit market developed 20 years ago, that there were not really those integrity guardrails there so early on in the market development. So I think for anyone working in the space, this is good news, because it means that the early pilot project credits that are being developed aligned with those global integrity principles will actually be of relatively good quality. So I think, and I also need to say that I think projects like Biobus is extremely helpful because it illustrates probably one of the most promising use cases with nature credits or biodiversity credits. And that is, and as we mentioned before, the product integration use case, which I think is something that you could definitely be scaled and might actually be interesting to many clients and customers.
Interesting. So if you would make a recommendation, what would it be for biocredit project developers? What should they focus on to ensure a project gain market acceptance and to become attractive and credible investments?
Yeah, I think first of all, don't make up your own kind of homemade system. Don't kind of define these things yourself, but stick to the already existing global definitions. Stick to the existing methodologies that has been reviewed and approved by scientific bodies. I think that would be the most important takeaway message to don't invent the wheel again, but try to stick to what's already there. I think when it comes to marine credits, the situation is a little bit more complex because there are not that many alternatives out there that actually works, especially not for let's say more northern marine ecosystems. So that is definitely an area to where more work needs to be done and more methodologies need to be developed. But I would say the general message is also to try to engage also with NGOs at the local scale, because that's something that we see corporates value a lot, that there's sort of an acceptance from local NGOs. This is not, something that will harm the environment or will just be basically greenwashing. And also, I think it's important. Sorry,
please go.
A third point just would be, I think understanding the needs of the buyers is important also to kind of design your project in a way that makes it easier for the corporates to actually integrate the nature improvements that the credits represents into the let's say the corporate ESG work, their strategies, their disclosures, their target setting, etc. So I think it's if you want to be successful, you need to understand the buyer's needs as always, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. Those are really valuable comments. Ruth, do you want to comment anything when you hear Carola and Martin?
Good question. No, but I think it's really it's nice to hear both perspectives. It's this we've gone very very broad. We looked at so many different things, and these somehow have the few that we've chosen we think are really the most powerful. And I think it's important to keep the time perspective in mind here, that so if the biodiversity credit market is starting up, but this wind power or offshore wind power farm won't be in place maybe until 2030, and what will the landscape look like then? So I think it's important to get information now and constantly evaluate these options, because we need to build credibility. We need to really, as Martin also says, like we have to live up to these the integrity of the biodiversity credits or units, and really be one of those projects that are very firm about the integrity of these credits. That's why I also said measuring it and being accurate when we measure it is so important, because we don't want to be one of the projects that takes away from the credibility in this. And also I think it's such a good point with how do we actually make it desirable for companies to buy these? How can they integrate it into their companies? How does it make sense to them? We don't know that. And I think a lot of people involved in this industry and want to see it evolve are looking at that. So it's we need to keep a close eye monitoring it, basically.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think we're in that sense, it's good that with Nordic Innovation gave us the opportunity to carry out this pilot project, so that by the time there are actually offshore wind parks being built, new ones being built in the Baltic Sea and elsewhere in the Nordics, we are sort of prepared for this. And also reading between the lines from what you're saying, I'm thinking that biodiversity credits or working with biodiversity somehow could also give this sort of social acceptance to these kinds of projects, or it could be one aspect of helping out with that. So now we're sort of moving on to how do you actually evaluate and make sure that this is not greenwashing, that there is actually something happening, something good happening, like we heard from our colleagues at the first sort of half of the seminar. So if we sort of move back to that, and I also want to remind you that you can ask questions. It says F and S, so for questions and answers in the top menu. So please, if you have questions, write them there, but I will also open up the floor to questions very shortly. So Matthias, if I can loop you in here, you're a researcher at the University of Gothenburg, but you also run a company that helped us do this AI surveying. What are your thoughts on the current structures that we talked about here, and why will monitoring be critical moving forward?
Well, yes. First, I need to say thank you for a wonderful presentation of the overall project, and I should also say that I'm really impressed by all the outputs. And of course, I want to congratulate you, because I think to me it is impressive as an ecologist, because I think you really cracked this big puzzle that we are fighting with all the time, that we are trying to connect this value chain from the end to the end. That is all the way when you are looking at the ecosystem and all the creatures that are in there, and you're trying to monitor them, all the way to involve the researchers, then further than small businesses, and connecting it further to big businesses and actually developing new concepts. And that would be also my main comment, where I think you have really we are leading the field, and you have really on the edge that you have managed to establish this connection, so that you try to maintain it. And it's maybe still very fragile, but you have all the key pieces in place. And that's my main recommendation here, to just try and maintain it in the future. Me as a scientist, I work with the scientific agenda, and there's always the major saying about our ambitions is to create the science we need for the ocean we want. So the science should be doing science, supporting society and the societal needs. And here we have these immense societal needs, and the scientific community is ready to support you. And but then it's always the question how, and you have given this opportunity. So I'm really happy to see this project, and I'm really giving you my deep congratulations. So as a little recommendation, we are in the middle of the United Nations Ocean Decade program, which is a very ambitious program for this decade until 2030, to deliver concepts and actually implementations that show how we can restore the ocean and how we can manage the ocean in a responsible and sustainable way. And there's different parts of it, like the digital twin of the ocean project, and you are fitting right into it. You're giving a really good examples and a really good concept. So I also would like to see more of that in these contexts, and that you promote the project in this direction. Okay,
you,
that was my little.
Great.
I just had to get this off my chest. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, when it's as positive as that, we have to create space for it, right? That's great. I'm
so back to your question.
Yeah. So if you could just reflect a little bit on what your thoughts are on the structures that we put in the water, the pilots that we had, and also a little bit on how monitoring. Why is it an important tool to create? Now I've lost the right word, but to be
to make it measurable, the
exactly.
biodiversity, the status and the change of biodiversity. That is the big challenge. That because when you're coming from the carbon sector, it's like you measure chemical or physical states of the ocean, and in the atmosphere. And then the instruments to do that, they have been developed 100 years ago, but complexity is much more higher when it comes to biodiversity. So everyone wonders, what do you mean by it get more biodiversity? Do you mean more species, or is it more the same species but they're more abundant, or is it like certain life stages that is the small little schools of fishes that are actually becoming more? And so we have to, there is some ways to systematically chop this down, and one way would be to take an ecosystem and you have 3 different levels of biological organization, and that is the genetic is the very basic level, and you have the species level, the higher level, and then you have the ecosystem level, and there's all kind of metrics you can establish there. And you have shown that you're already starting with some of these, and you don't need, nobody needs to show everything, just that you're able to turn that into a measurable number that you can then connect to the financial the indicators, so to say, or to connect it to any sort of financial tool or evaluation, that you translate this into an economic number, and that is nice to see that. So I think that's the right way, and it has to be efficient. So the human is always has to be there to supervise this process, but in the long run, the concept is that it's machines that do the measurements. So it can be anything from satellites to these underwater robots that go around to the thing that Joel has shown with deploying underwater observatories. So it will be machines measuring, and then the biologists will supervise that process of analytics. That is the way forward, because humans are too expensive, and they don't scale very well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, the cost efficiency of monitoring. So because of course, as we have as a focus today, there needs to be a business case in it, and if the monitoring is a huge cost, then then we've got a challenge. But I think I also want to say that our final report will soon be available, and of course we will make some recommendations for what we think are important things to look at forward, and the monitoring part is one of them. So thank you very much, Matthias. So I just want to sort of slide into some questions, and